Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Rachel Lang Show. I'm your host, Rachel. And in today's episode, we are going to move away from some of the topics of recent discussions, and we're going to step far, far away from politics and from the economy and from those outer planet transits. And we are going to talk about something that every single one of us can relate to. We're going to talk about love. And in particular, we're going to talk about Venus, my favorite planet. Now, I am fully representing my Venus in Scorpio, as you can tell if you're watching this on YouTube. I've got the dark lipstick, I've got a very scorpionic look going on today. And so I am honoring my own Venus, which they say that Venus is in its detriment in Scorpio and that it's not in a great condition. But I am going to dispel that myth because I think that Venus in Scorpio loves with passion and depth. And if you are fortunate enough to be in a relationship with someone who has Venus in Scorpio, they're never going to leave. But also, there's just every single Venus sign and every single Venus house has its own unique gifts and challenges. And we're going to talk about those today. We're also going to touch on the subject of love and relationships. I can't tell you how many times I have people ask me the question about compatibility. What sign should I be with? I'm an Aries. Should I be with a Libra? Should I be with a Cancer? And I think sun sign astrology has done us a disservice in that we are only identifying ourselves with one aspect of relationships in the chart when every single planet is involved in our relationship story. So we're going to talk a little bit about synastry and composite charts. As many of you know, I teach a relationships and astrology course with Margaret Gray and Anne Ortley, and we cover all facets of relationships in this certification course. And I have spent a lot of time looking at relationship charts. I've spent a lot of time teaching this material, and I've also spent a lot of time in my own personal life having our relationship be an experimentation in ways to work with the chart, ways to work with the composite chart, and ways to explore the subject of relationships in astrology. Have you ever asked yourself, why do I always attract this kind of person? Why do I always seem to get into the same patterns in relationships? Your astrology can tell you a lot about why that happens and what you can do about it. When I look at astrology and relationships, I don't think there's any such thing as incompatibility because we are attracting people into our lives who are reflecting themes and patterns from our childhood, from our families of origin, from karmic past life information. Our relationships are here for our soul's growth and our soul's evolution. That is one of the best ways we do our spiritual work here on earth. I'm not just talking about romantic relationships, although those definitely compel us to grow. I'm also talking about our friendships, the relationship with your boss or your coworker, your sibling relationships. Every relationship is reflected in your chart, and everything that's reflected in your chart shows a deeper soul calling, something that you came here to experience and to move through, whether you like it or not. Let's start by talking about Venus. And this is looking at Venus in the natal chart. In astrology, each planet represents a different psychological drive. It represents a different aspect of your personality and a different theme in your life. Venus is known as the planet of love, relationships, beauty, harmony, and pleasure. At the core of all things Venus, we find themes of self-worth and how much we value ourselves, and how do our spending habits and relationships reflect how much we value ourselves. And so, if you wonder why you get into relationships with people who don't treat you very well, or why some of your romantic relationships have the dynamics, those out of balance dynamics of ways in which you're not respected, or ways in which you might be more powerful or have more of a voice in your relationships. And so, your Venus can tell you a lot about those things. Think about your Venus as being the magnetic attractor. Venus is, if you look at Botticelli's Venus, for example, the painting, that famous painting of the birth of Venus, you'll see Venus glowing, standing on a half shell, being blown by the wind gods. She is not moving, she is not doing anything, she is allowing things to unfold for her. And she's in a state of receptivity. Venus represents that aspect of you that can allow things to happen easily. And so this is related to what we attract into our lives, the opportunities we attract into our lives, things that can come somewhat effortlessly. We have two benefic planets, meaning planets that are supportive of the things that we want, the things that make life rich and worth experiencing. And those planets are Venus and Jupiter. Venus is the lesser benefic. Unless you're born in the nighttime, then Venus is your girl. That is the strong planet in your chart. And Jupiter is the greater benefic. So Jupiter is the biggest planet in our solar system, and Jupiter shines really brightly. And so Jupiter represents things like abundance, expansion. It represents opportunity. And Venus represents what is pleasing to the senses. Venus is a very embodied part of our chart, and Venus doesn't want to work too hard. Your Venus doesn't want to work too hard. And this is an important point that I wanted to bring out, because when we're talking about love and relationships, we have a balance of that active, assertive pursuit energy, identifying what the will wants, and the receptive, receiving, allowing influence. And when these are out of balance, our relationships are out of balance. And often it's the receptive aspects of our relationships that get us out of balance, because we live in a culture that is a hustle culture, that is a go after what you want culture, that is based on ideas of capitalism. And your sense of self-worth related to your economic worth and value. And so our Venuses get squelched over the course of our lives, because Venus just wants to luxuriate. She just wants to love. She wants those soft skills. Venus also relates to our creativity and those heart-to-heart connections. And so when you're wondering why your relationships are out of balance, it might be that receptivity, a call to that receptivity. Venus also represents how you express yourself through style, through your look, through the colors that you wear. And so it's, how do you express your own sense of self out in the world? Let's break down the 4 elements to see how Venus behaves differently in each one of the elements. And we're going to start with fire signs. If your Venus is in a fire sign, you love with passion, with intensity, with spontaneity, and there's a real craving for excitement. You might enjoy grand gestures to show your affection, or want to have adventures with your love and with your dates. The thing about fire is that all fire signs need a good balance of individuation and connection, especially our Aries and our Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a free-spirited sign, and Aries is the sign of the independent, of the individuated self. And I find that Aries, because Mars rules Aries and Venus is in a Mars-ruled sign when she's in Aries, I find that people with Venus in Aries tend to automatically put themselves in the role of the pursuer, in the role of the one who was going out and conquering. And remember, Venus wants to receive. This is also true of Venus in Scorpio too. So Venus in Aries, Venus in Scorpio need to learn how to open those receiving channels. And Venus in Aries, you can take a lesson from your Venus in Leo friends and counterparts, because Venus in Leo is the queen. And for Venus in Leo, if you are not being treated as a queen or as a prince or a king or however you identify, if you are not being respected and adored in a relationship, it's going to get very tired very fast. If your relationship becomes all about rote and the business of your relationship, then there's nothing that's like fluffing up your Venus. And so it's going to be important for you, especially, to find ways to recreate that passion, to re-inspire your romance, flowers, chocolates, dinners out. The Venus in Leo wants to have a lavish experience of love. Now let's talk about Venus in Earth signs. So our Earth signs are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. And Venus rules Taurus. Very happy in Taurus. She loves being in her own sign. Venus rules Taurus and Libra. And so Venus has no problem reveling in the embodied aspect of that sign with the delicious food, the beautiful surroundings. I find Venus in Taurus has a really unique sense of color and design. I find Venus in Taurus to be highly curated in terms of the kinds of things that you have in your space and the way that you express yourself through your physical space or through your website. There is an elegance and a balance to the way that you express yourself. Whenever Venus is an earth sign, it is very sensual. Venus in an earth sign attracts people who are going to have some sort of material stability. And this doesn't always mean wealth. This means that their partners care about having comfort, having beautiful things, having delicious things. And there's a real need for security, for stability in those relationships, especially when we're talking about Venus in Capricorn. Capricorn is a traditional sign. So Venus in Capricorn has a draw toward the traditions of your culture. There is even sometimes a desire to have established roles within the relationship. And historically, that might be gender roles, but I find that that's very different now, that it's more of you want your relationship to feel like it's moving towards something and also reflect the values of your childhood and the values of your past. And that's Venus in Capricorn. Venus in Virgo. Now, Venus is exalted, meaning she's very happy in the sign of Pisces, which means that Virgo being opposite of Pisces, Venus is in its fall. And so that means that Venus, who loves to love, who loves to attract, has to work a little bit harder in the sign of Virgo, because Virgo is all about the meticulous discernment of having a filter up for what belongs and what is of value and what is not. Venus in Virgo is a curator. And so sometimes that Venus in Virgo placement can indicate that you have guidelines for who comes into your life and who you engage with. Venus in an earth sign wants to create a container for love that is safe, that is solid, that is secure. Now let's talk about Venus in air signs. So our air signs are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. And Venus in an air sign loves the intellectual experience of being in a relationship, loves talking, loves having compatible interests, and being able to explore new places, new restaurants, new bookstores. Travel is something that Venus in air signs in particular loves to have as a connecting point, as a part of the relationship. Venus in Gemini is very playful. You don't want to take things too seriously. You are very curious. And so sometimes Venus in Gemini, depending on other chart factors, might not be the first to rush into a commitment. You want to test things out. You want to make sure that the relationship can keep reinventing itself over time and that it stays fresh and vital and new. Venus in Gemini, I find to be versatile in relationships, not as fixed in terms of, well, I only date this type of person and I only do these kinds of things. No, it's, well, I might be open to trying something new, to dating outside of my social circle. You want to gather experiences and to attract new ideas into your life. Sometimes Venus in an air sign can really fall in love with the idea of somebody or the idea of love itself. I see this especially with Venus in Libra. And then when you get into the practical day-to-day aspects of a relationship and that habituation sets in, sometimes Venus in an air sign can get bored. And so you have to keep reinventing your relationship so that you don't open your mind to new possibilities and then run away in a fantasy or in falling in love with some kind of idea of someone else. Venus in Libra is in her own sign, very happy in Libra, loves beauty, loves fashion, loves balance. And so they're looking for a partnership that is equal, one where there's mutual respect, where they can create a beautiful space together. They have similar styles and similar expressions. This is a very romantic placement too. And especially if Neptune is in an aspect relationship with Venus or the moon or the sun or Jupiter, then that just expands the potential for Venus to do what she loves to do, which is love. Venus in Aquarius is a little quirky. And so you might find that you are really attracted to people who don't fit within a box, people who are challenging you intellectually, or people who are opening you up to social circles. And you might find that a lot of your friends either come into your life through relationships or that you become friends with someone before you move into a romantic relationship. Or sometimes it can be that you start dating someone, you fall in love, and that person over time becomes like your best friend. Venus in Aquarius is interested in stretching the mind, in letting love break open their preconceived notions. Sometimes Venus in Aquarius can be a monogamist, but this is not a sign that wants the traditional relationship context. And so I find people with Venus in Aquarius can wrestle with questions of non-monogamy or looking at different types of relationships. And we have to remember that Saturn is associated with Aquarius. And so that tendency toward stability, toward tradition is there beneath the surface. And so what I find a lot is when I'm working with clients who are in non-monogamous or polyamorous relationships with Venus and Aquarius, that it can be very uncomfortable to move away from the idea of monogamy, even though your sign, your Venus placement says that you don't have a box that you want to be constrained within. Now let's talk about those water sign Venuses. Now, water sign Venuses, this is me. I'm one of them. And so I can tell you, water is the element of emotion. It's the element that is intuitive, that wants to sync up in a spiritual, even non-physical way. Water sign Venuses want deep emotional connections. They tend to be more empathic and empathetic. They want to connect through dreams, through intimacy, through experiences of pouring your heart out. Now, Venus in Cancer is a little self-protective. So if you think about Cancer being the sign of the crab has a little shell on it, and it's not a very hard shell. It's very soft. And so Cancer Venus can love and feel a little vulnerable in the experience of love. And so you have to pass some tests with Venus and Cancer. And Venus and Cancer needs emotional security in order to feel attracted. There is a deep connection and an intuitive connection that Venus and Cancer makes. Venus in Cancer also wants stability. And because Cancer is one of the cardinal signs, along with Capricorn, Libra, and Aries, Venus in Cancer might be the first one to express their feelings and their love, unless they've been hurt. And in that case, they have that wall of that little shell of protection up, and they want to know with absolute certainty, this is going to work before I put my heart on the line. Venus in Scorpio I'm a big fan personally, but Venus in Scorpio, love is transcendent. And that is one of those key words for Scorpio, that the act of love, the experience of love takes us out of ourselves. And there's a tendency to merge with others, with another. Because Scorpio is one of those traditionally Mars-ruled signs, Venus in Scorpio can feel more comfortable, more familiar with being on the prowl and being in pursuit of a relationship or something or someone, instead of sitting back and just allowing themselves to receive. Venus in Scorpio also has a deep desire to know this is going to work out, this is going to last, I can dig my heels in before they commit. And when a Venus in Scorpio commits, it tends to be for the long run. Any kind of fixed sign Venus, so that would be our Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, or Aquarius, fixed sign Venus individuals, I find, tend to stay in a relationship, working out the challenges, sometimes even after the relationship has run its course. So this is something I also say for Venus and Scorpio. When you have that intuition of, you know what, this is probably not for me, that is the time to address the issues, and that is the time to walk away instead of staying in something for years, knowing that little voice inside keeps letting you know, hey, this isn't working. Now we have Venus in Pisces. Pisces is Venus's sign of exaltation. And that means that Venus gets to function exactly as she loves to. Pisces is the sign of universal love. It is the sign of oneness. It is the sign of non-attachment from the material and attachment into the spiritual. And so people with Venus in Pisces tend to love exponentially, without bounds. That means that sometimes you can miss the red flags in a relationship, especially in those first few months of dating when there's so much potential and you want it to work out. And so Venus in Pisces is the forgiver. It's the second chance giver. And so boundaries become really important for someone with Venus in Pisces. Venus in Pisces is also extremely creative. It loves with wild abandon. And so Venus in Pisces can be very giving, very generous. And it's important to just keep that in balance, keep that in perspective. Here is a short commercial break to let you know that I will be in Sedona with two other esteemed astrologers at the end of March for a Neptune in Aries Arises retreat. All through March, we have an online series. Each week, we'll be covering a different topic related to Neptune in Aries. Don't miss the opportunity to join an intimate group as we gear up for this monumental transit at a time of incredible global shift. How do astrologers approach the topic of relationship compatibility? How do we see where the sticky points are, where the drama is, and where the connecting points are, the chemistry is? There are two different types of charts that we look at. One is Synastry. Synastry is when you take two charts and you put them on top of one another in a bi-wheel chart, looking at them together, right with those elements right next to each other. And so you can see all of the different ways that their charts connect, all of the different ways that their charts relate with one another, the challenges, the ways that your partner reminds you of your mother or your father or your sibling. They show all of the nuances of your relationship. And so synastry is what we look at when we look at how does your Mercury connect with your partner's Mercury or your boss's Mercury or your mom's Mercury. And your Mercury sign is going to show how you communicate, what you like to talk about, and the differences in what you're thinking about, what you're talking about. Mercury in our charts is like our inner dialogue. And so it's what are we talking to ourselves about? What are we thinking about most of the time? And so I find that Mercury is really important in looking at compatibility and looking at synastry charts. Then we also have Mars, and Mars relates to how we engage in conflict or not. It relates to our passion, so the sexual aspects of our relationship. And so we can see Mars relationships in synastry charts. And so we can see the way our partner's Mars activates ours and vice versa. And that shows what you might fight about or argue about, where there are points of contention, and the different arguing styles. Are you one who shuts down and kind of simmers or retreats? Or are you one who is going to be more assertive, wanting to talk things out? Or are you going to be the type of person who slams the door and walks away and your partner is sitting there waiting for you? Mars tells us all of those things. Mars also shows what motivates us. And in relationships, this is important because if you're motivated by travel and you've got that Sagittarius Mars, or you're motivated by new adventures, finding ways to seek spiritually and learn new things, and your partner is motivated by, let's say, physical pleasure, if we're talking about Mars and Taurus, the earth, grounding, stability, money, if your partner is motivated by those things, then you need to find points of connection. And so this is where I think that it's great that we have the love languages and the 5 love languages, affection, gifts, words of affirmation, etc. But I think finding someone's Mars and what turns them on is invaluable in a relationship. Mars also relates to what sexually we're interested in and ways in which we like to engage in intimacy with our partners. So that's Mars. And then we have the moon, and the moon is our emotional center. And so it's how do we feel and what are we feeling and are we open to feeling and can we talk about our feelings, or do we tend to think more than we feel, or do we resist talking about our emotions? So the moon represents that. And then the sun is our general sense of vitality. And so the sun shows us how we want to shine our light in the world, how we want people to know us, and what are our core priorities in terms of the legacy we lead, how we want others to be talking about us. And then our Saturn's always the sticky point in a relationship. And when we're looking at synastry, how does one person's Saturn relate to the other person's chart? Saturn is tricky because it's the glue that makes a relationship stick. And so it's often those sticky points that we are coming back to work on and to perfect and to learn from. But it can also represent areas in our relationships where we feel like others are controlling us, or where we feel like we want to be in control. And so some of those power struggles that every relationship has can be identified by looking at Saturn. What house is your partner's Saturn in your chart? If your rising sign is Virgo and your partner's Saturn is Virgo, do you feel judged? Do you feel criticized for not taking care of your body, or for the way you look, or do you feel just held back in general? And if so, it's often, here's the funny thing about Saturn, it's often our own limitations that we project onto others. And so Saturn becomes a really big player in healing the rifts of relationships, and also in having relationships that aren't just projection or transference, but where you're healing a lot of those childhood issues that relate to your Saturn. Then we have Jupiter. Jupiter represents where we feel good, where we want to experience joy. And Jupiter is that planet that relates to how we create our lives together. Do we attract abundance in a similar way? Are we open to spiritual exploration? It's our faith in ourselves, our faith in others, our faith in the goodness of the world, or lack thereof. And Jupiter is a really big player in terms of thinking about our religious ideologies and how our beliefs shape and mold who we are as individuals. And then you put that in a relationship context, and Jupiter shows what are our spiritual growth edges and how do we willingly approach those. Then we have the North and South nodes, those karmic points, those destiny points that relate to what we're here to experience and what we're here to clean up and work with. And I find there are very often North and South node connections in intimate relationships. And that's because people, we come here to work out our karma together. We come here to grow and evolve. And the nodes show us where we are doing that in relationships. So the house that they're in your partner's chart shows how they can best support you in fulfilling your purpose. And the house that your nodes are in your partner's house also show ways in which you might need to stretch yourself too and get out of your comfort zone. Then we have those outer planets. We have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And each one of these represents something different. Uranus is freedom. It is the ways in which we want to stretch outside of the box and break down and revolutionize all of those past laws and rules and beliefs that were passed down to us. And so Uranus can be a restless influence in our composite and synastry charts. And Uranus can also show us where we might resist commitment or where we're going to need some space to individuate. Neptune is our dreams, it's our fantasies, it is what we hold as an ideal. And it's also the illusions that we have coming into a relationship. And the stories we can tell ourselves about partnership or about the other people in our lives. And so Neptune can show us both where we need to ask more questions, and it can also show us where we might need to find some grounding. And then Pluto represents what is the purpose that defines how we come together. What are we here to heal? Big picture. What are the psychological motives? Where are we going to run into power and control issues and have to resolve those? Pluto shows us what we're dying to and what's being reborn. And wherever your partner's Pluto is in relation to your chart, you might feel like, "Ooh, I have no control over this. I am just in a place of absolute surrender." You might feel like that deep sense of chemistry that you can't avoid. You might feel the relationship is fated, like you are brought together. And so that's Pluto's influence. And then we have the ascendant. The ascendant is the sign on the eastern horizon, and the ascendant is how you express yourself to the world, how you receive the world. It's like your first line of defense. And usually I find that if your partner has planets in the first house, those planets get to help you shine your brightest. And so if your partner is in your first house, then that person, you might feel just lit up and revitalized when you're with that person. But the ascendant also sets the entire structure for the chart. And so it shows what's in the seventh house, which is the house of partnership, and what's in the fifth house, which is romance. It's also children and play. Can you have fun together? So with Synastry charts, you put your two charts together and compare them. Composite charts are when you take all of the points in your charts and you find a meeting point, a midpoint between them. Shows your relationship. And so it's when two people come together, the relationship takes on a life of its own. And so the composite chart shows the nature of the relationship. It's funny, my wife Tisha and I, we say that I'm Rachel, she's Tisha, but when we come together, we're Raisha. And so the composite chart shows what Raisha needs, what Raisha wants. And I find that looking at the composite sun, what house is in your composite chart, what sign is it in, that's going to tell you about the overall quality of your relationship and things that are important to you, and really why you are together and how to milk the joy out of your relationship. Now, maybe you are listening to this and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so curious. I have to find out where my Venus is. I have to find out where my partner's Venus is. I have to look at our composite charts. There are lots of resources available for you to do a deeper dive. You can go to astro.com and get your charts all printed out. There are other websites too. My website, rachellangastrologer.com, has free chart services. You can go to Cafe Astrology, but whatever you do, don't go to ChatGPT or AI and plug in your birth information. It is not accurate. Go to a reputable source, or better yet, go and have a relationship reading. Get your compatibility all checked out with an astrologer. It's mind-blowing what you can find out from looking at your charts, looking at the synastry and looking at the composite. You can see all of the minute details of your relationship. The reason why your partner doesn't like certain foods and you do. All of that is there. And Venus is one of the main influences that gives us that information. This one just gives you a little glimpse of what's possible when you work with your Venus and when you work with your astrology in your relationships. It really is a game changer in terms of how you can gain compassion for your partner or for others in your life, and how you can see the points of connection. So your cosmic call to action for the week, for Valentine's Day week, is to look up your Venus sign. If you haven't done so yet, familiarize yourself with your Venus sign. Do some journaling. Find out what is your Venus sign if you don't know it already, and ask, how does my Venus sign relate to my ability to allow goodness into my life? How can you work with your Venus to open yourself to receive? Because when we're talking about receptivity, we're not just talking about allowing our partners to do something nice for us. We're also talking about the art of allowing, as Esther Hicks would say. We're talking about how comfortable are we? How much self-worth do we have to allow ourselves to receive all the goodness that's possible for us in our lives? So get to know your Venus sign and open up that receptive channel to allow more love into your life and to connect more with others, and also to love yourself a little bit deeper. I hope you know how much I love you, and I hope you receive all of the goodness that I am sending your way. Thank you for listening, and I will be back next time.